recording right now, by the way. Just so you know.
Welcome to Brotherhood, a spoiler-filled podcast where we review each episode of the deliciously nightmare-inducing work that is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I make that sound like a Danish. My name is Timothy MacArthur, the taller brother.
My name is Dylan MacArthur, the older brother.
Today's episode, The First Day. An unfair trade brings the military your way.
Today's episode, The First Day, so called because it is neither the first nor a single day.
The first day, Aaron's favorite day of school and least favorite day of military school.
The First Day, the opening chapter to my pretentious biography of the universe.
Oh, and it's also the second episode of Full Metal Alchemist.
The first episode was My Adventure to the Anvil Factory.
This was a really weighty episode.
But
I cried.
I'll be honest. I cried too. Though, as we were talking about before we began recording, at a slightly different scene. So, what was the scene that made you cry during this episode?
Well, actually, a few nearly made me cry. When Edward was trying to get his brother back to the suit of armor thing, by using blood to make a
he uses his own
circle.
blood to draw a transmutation circle into the suit of armor.
And what he says, I'm like, wow, this guy is desperate.
Can we talk for a moment? I want to get back to why this episode made us cry, but can we just talk about Edward makes this episode. Yes. He has a fantastic character. From the beginning, we get the sense, even as a young child, he's overly ambitious and kind of full of himself. As they might say, he has a hubris that is quite strong. Normally, in any other work, this would lead him to disregard everyone around him. I was very impressed when they were beginning the transmutation circle and Alphonse says to Edward, I'm scared, and he starts freaking out. Edward doesn't push him at all because he's just as scared. I think in any other show or story, his response would have been, just keep doing it. It'll all be worth it in the end. But he doesn't say that. He doesn't negate his brother's feelings at all. And even later on in the story, when he sees what he has done, it isn't, oh, I've screwed up royalty. It's, oh, my brother is gone. My poor brother. He cares about his brother, and that overrides his own ambition.
And I really like that scene. I think it kind of shows just how much he was a kid,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it makes sense that he'd do that as a kid. I mean, sure, it was advanced alchemy for a kid, but still, it was like his instincts were still that of a little kid. He wanted someone to be around him.
The scene for me that got my tears going, and I don't even know why, but that moment when the camera moves up and we see in the center of the circle where they had the materials that were supposed to become their mother, and we see instead this poor, pitiful, blackened creature that is just bleeding from every orifice.
Maybe it's because you felt really sorry for the creature. I mean, I kind of did. I was like, oh man, that thing's alive.
It's alive. It's probably vaguely human, but also this was supposed to be their mother.
Yeah, I feel sorry for that thing because basically both the brothers kind of see it as a failure.
Should we start from the beginning?
Yeah, we can do that.
So we start off, we're in a train. They're having some sort of conversation that you're not really paying particularly close attention to. They're just talking.
I think it's kind of meant to be that way for on the train,
I have a note here from that particular scene which says, 3 minutes in, and we already have an expository line about the Philosopher's Stone, and it's a build-up to a joke. And I think that this is where the second episode, the writing really succeeds over the writing for the first episode, because we still get a lot of exposition here. In fact, most of it is exposition, but it's all build-up.
And I think it's also done beautifully, like when Edward is talking about the Philosopher's Stone, and then he complains about the book not telling them where to get it. I thought that was a great part. I thought that was a great way to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Because it does what so much of this episode does, which is that you have these elements of the story that are all doing multiple things at the same time. My favorite example of that in this episode is later on when Riza and Roy come to the house and they're split up so that Riza is talking to Winry and Roy is talking to the grandmother and Edward and Alphonse. The traditional way of going about this is that you go to Roy and you have them do their thing, and then during the slow bits of that conversation, you cut to Riza and Winry, and they have their conversation, and then when that is done, you go back and you finish the conversation that is at the table. But that's not the way that they do it. Instead,
and it's great.
They overlap it in the editing so that you have lines that are being said. It feels like a continuous sentence from Roy and Riza, but they're fulfilling different purposes to different people. It compresses that time significantly, and it makes for much more interesting drama.
Like, for example, Riza makes it so that Winry is a little bit more okay with Edward going to see the military. You'll realize this throughout the rest of the episode, that she isn't exactly completely okay with it, but she's a lot more understanding after that.
We see that her character, even though Winry has very, very little to do in this episode, because there isn't enough time, she still has a story. She still has her own little arc within that episode of going from, oh, I hate the military, to actually I think it's okay and I'm inspired by it to be better myself.
It is an interesting little change, and it might seem like a dramatic change in a way.
Can we also talk about how funny the first bit of this episode is?
Dang it, why don't books tell us where to find it? It tells us all about the Philosopher's Stone, except for to find it, you jerk. You book. You're a jerk.
Which is a great little twist on that kind of a cliched shot. But also the interactions between the two brothers and Winry throughout this episode are just hilarious.
I kind of saw them as, I didn't really find them hilarious. Oh, are you talking about the time, like that one time when Edward gets hit with a wrench?
Yes, exactly.
That was pretty funny, yeah. It's
a great little bit of character, and you immediately think to yourself, these two are going to get together in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
I'm feeling it. That's I think that's what they're leading up to.
Oh my gosh.
But there's a lot of humor, a lot of humor in this episode, which is great because there's also a lot of really messed up stuff going on here.
Yeah. Like, I go through the episode and I'm already like, well, I'm wondering if I'm going to be able to sleep tonight.
I had that feeling too, but then I realized, wait a minute, I can't sleep tonight because I've got stuff to do.
Well, the problem with me is that I've been having problems with, I don't know what my deal is, but I just couldn't fall asleep for most of last night. I could go to sleep during the day. I think I'm turning into a vampire or something.
So we're introduced to these characters, and we learn that Dad is not to be found. We're not quite sure why. I don't think we're told in this episode what happened to their dad. But I imagine from your reaction right there, we will probably find out later on in the season.
Oh, boy, do we.
We are also introduced to the mom, who I think has a funny introduction where she's like, you guys are crazy, but I love you. But this is crazy, but also amazing.
She's like, this is crazy, but I totally encourage it.
Which is not what a good mother would do, but we just sort of accept it that, okay, yeah, sure. This is a realm where magic is somewhat normal. Okay, fine.
Well, alchemy. I think alchemy in this case is kind of like a bridge between magic and...
I mean, it is functionally magic. If they had introduced it from the very beginning as saying, okay, this is magic, it wouldn't make any difference to your experience of the show.
I think it would be not as cool in terms of the name.
Certainly you would miss out on the references to the occult.
Yeah, definitely. I think I like the idea of it being called alchemy because, you know, it is a magic because you have no idea how they're doing that. You have no idea, like, how are they getting all this ability to make blue sparks and just separate hydrogen from helium and call it a day, you know?
It is somewhat asserted as sort of just like
somewhat
science, somewhat metaphysics. I think that alchemy is a good name for it, for the atmosphere that they have surrounding it.
I like to consider it like if there was a bridge between magic, and science, alchemy would be like a person like just standing right in the middle of the bridge and would be like, hey guys, and probably interfering with traffic, but I will.
My first complaint for this episode, and I realize I'm going to sound very pretentious complaining about something which I do not have the skill to recreate, but I'm going to do it anyway. During the cemetery scene, or when we learn of the mother having died, there's a shot.
Yeah, I feel like there was something wrong with it, too. I felt like it was a little rushed, like the mother just dying. I would have liked to learn more about the mother.
This is the thing about parents dying when the main character is really young. If it's a young child and there's a mother nearby, she just has a bullseye right on her forehead the entire time. And you just sort of expect that when she finally dies, it's just like, well, this is a cartoon. It was bound to happen.
And if she doesn't die, well, then that's a little...
Well, then she's just going to become a wicked stepmother. That's what happens.
Or she's just going to turn out, I don't know, to be really BA or something. I don't know.
One of the three. But honestly, I wasn't particularly bothered by how rushed it was. I can absolutely understand people feeling like it was rushed. But for me, the thing that sort of bothered me was there's a shot towards the end where we see her headstone, where it says Trisha Elric, 18 such and such to 1904. And my immediate thought was, did we really need to know what time frame this takes place in?
Like, no, was not really.
No, like... This is the thing about text, is that you assume when you see something up front and center that it should be important. But in this instance, it wasn't really. Like, we didn't need to know her name. We didn't need to know when this story was. It felt like a superfluous shot to me. The whole focus is the text. So you would think that the text would be absolutely essential. But you see it, and it's...
I was mostly paying attention to the name, not the day type stuff. That is a little weird that they had to include that. I'm okay with them including the name. Because, you know, it wouldn't make sense if they said just Edward's mom, Elric. That wouldn't make any sense.
Mrs. Elric. Yeah, that would have been that would have been distracting.
So I'm okay with them saying Trisha Elric on the gravestone.
I don't even think that they needed that shot at all, honestly. I think that they could have taken it out and it would have been perfectly fine. And I would have been less distracted by them asserting that, yes, this takes place in the turn of the century, which isn't really necessary because we already get that from the visuals.
Yeah, we do. I mean, it doesn't make any sense why they would make that shot, because it's like, guys, we aren't stupid. We get instinctually that this happens during the turn of the century. Even if you aren't thinking about it, you feel it because of all the environment that is given in the show.
After this scene, Edward and Alphonse commence work on discovering and figuring out how they can bring their mother to life. And I love how they open up the whole sequence with them measuring the exact amount of water that they need and all of the individual elements from it. It reminded me very much of something that either one of you or I might have done were we that old. Experimenting with some crazy magic, being like, oh, I'm going to be clever. I'm going to measure the individual elements that make up the human body.
Yeah, I actually kind of... I mean, I guess you could say I tried doing something similar, except I wasn't, like, actually doing the elements. I might have taken, like, a computer part and pretended this could be used for a brain or something. I don't know. I don't know what my deal was. But I remember asking Mom, like, why can't you give me your blood? I needed to make a human being.
But you were, like, 5 at the time, and so you were just sort of play acting.
Yeah.
But both you and I have had our share of overambitious building and feeling very clever.
I remember at one point I had this entire imagery in my mind of a robotic T-Rex thing made out of cardboard and other RC cars and all that, which is probably a cool idea should it be made, but I'm never going to be able to make that.
So they begin the process of human transmutation then commences the nightmare candy of
a giant eyeball appearing on the floor and all these really thin...
They're like those sticky hands that you would throw at something.
Except now...
Now they're ripping your brother apart and taking him to the land of the undead.
And they're also taking your leg and your arm.
Which, can we just talk about... Those fingers are a lovely little touch. Like, I know that's probably not the right adjective.
They're a lovely touch. I mean, it would have been so easy just to make them like tentacles or something. But I just love how they're hands, you know? That also leads to some speculation of mine. Like, does that mean that if Alphonse were to, like, say, have his soul completely taken by the gate, does that mean that he'd become something that would grab people and bring them into the gate?
Well, I thought that the implication was that he already was, and that Edward is too, that this is sort of what the force that makes up these hands is everything. And so in a sense, like, they are the destroying themselves even if they aren't aware of it.
Ouch.
I may be wrong about that reading. I don't know. I suspect that we will begin to understand this scene more and more as we progress through the series.
I like how in part of the episode, like, you know, after Edward, you know, gets through the gate, he's kind of distracted by all that knowledge that flooded his mind. And so, like, for a second, his hubris takes over. You know, he's like, oh, I just saw all this amazing stuff. I need to know more. Like, I'm missing something, and I knew it. I knew I was missing something. I know there's a chance for human transmutation. And then all of a sudden, truth just makes him go back to that cold floor in the basement.
Edward is a character who it would be very easy to absolutely hate, simply because he is so ridiculously ambitious. It's like, you're 11 years old. You should not be excited about this stuff. Like, you should be playing with small toys.
Instead, they're making small toys at the floor of their house using alchemy.
But, like, he has such a huge self-image that he's like, absolutely, I can do the impossible, even though nobody has ever been able to do this in the history of ever. He's like, oh, but I can do it because I'm special. Like, it is so easy to write a character like that that is incredibly annoying, but because he is so grounded and cares so deeply about other people,
I'm special, but I'm also annoying.
It manages to make it so that that isn't annoying, but that's rather that what helps us to relate to him as a character. Because I think that a lot of people can relate to that feeling of being like, I'm fundamentally different from everyone else, even though rationally, no, like, people are largely homogenous and very little is different between us.
I mean, I believe that there's definitely something that makes me me.
But it's not fundamentally different from what makes other people them.
Yeah. We're a group of individuals.
And yet, you just can't help but feel that somehow I am fundamentally different from everybody else in the world.
Well, I believe that there is a small piece of us that is fundamentally different, but I believe that piece is really small, if anything.
The other note that I have from this point in the episode is that the music here is working double time. I don't know if you noticed this, but
I noticed this.
This episode is sort of divided into two phases musically. You have the first half where every single cue that I noticed, at least, was being performed by a single instrument, and then you have the second phase, which is sort of in the middle of the transmutation.
Which, oh my gosh, the music definitely worked its magic.
And smack dab in the middle, when you have a choir, you've got a full string orchestra, very heavily influenced by classical music, I noticed also.
Oh my gosh. The best part is that I didn't think about the music. I was too busy crying over the fact that Edward lost so much. In that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel for you, man. The feels. The feels.
The choral music is very dramatic and very emotional, but even before then, the music does a lot to really, really sell this episode. The point where I wrote down this note about the music working overtime is right when we're introduced to this world beyond the worlds, where we see the gate and where
oh my gosh,
Edward is exposed to truth. Right now is a crucial moment where, because there is so little on screen, that it can visually inform you about what kind of a place this is, you need music to really sell is this place dangerous, or is this place benign? Or maybe it's something sort of in between there. And the glockenspiel, I believe, is the instrument that they use for it, creates this atmosphere of mystery, but also ominous danger at the same time that completely sells it.
Personally, I kind of feel like Truth is only a slight sadist. I'm wondering if Truth doesn't completely want to do his job. I get the sense that he's bored or something.
One gets the sense that Truth is not guided by emotion, but rather by this is simply the way things are, and I have no emotional judgment over this whatsoever. Although he does repeatedly tell Edward that he is an idiot and a fool for thinking that he could be so bold as to perform human transmutation, which reminded me very much of Frankenstein and that sort of attitude towards knowledge, which I find very annoying, but whatever, I accept it because it's so well done here.
I think that Truth might have emotion, it's just very little of it has sway over him.
Also, here's a question I have for you. Is the fact that Truth, when he starts talking with a mouth, is the fact that he looks like gluttony an accident or intentional or what? What's going on there?
Oh my gosh, I just realized something. Oh my gosh. Spoilers if I tell you.
Oh.
There will be major spoilers.
Well, we'll have to come back to this then later on.
We're definitely going to come back to this. It'll be a little down the road, but it will be amazing because let me tell you, you're getting a little taste.
So there is a reason for it, but you're not going to tell me yet.
I'm not going to tell you a kind of connection, but oh boy.
I have a few more stray observations
awesome.
Since we have followed a completely non-linear approach to talking about this episode.
I think we kind of threw away the linear approach last episode, so let's just keep on going.
I love the grandmother. Her character,
her character is hilarious, but also, she could go into a situation where most people would crap their pants, and she would just stare it down like what some people might call a librarian stare cranked up to 11 or something.
I love our introduction to her, too, because you see as she's exchanging insults with Edward, first off, you see where he gets it, and second off...
I'm sorry. But it makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. That's where he gets his foul mouth is from the grandmother. Yeah, that makes sense. I never really thought about that, but yeah.
But also because you're told in this scene that this is a woman who can hold her own against probably anything, which is...
I don't know about physically, but, she seems like she'd be, someone who you do not want to cross in a battle of wits.
Right, which you see sort of realized later on when she talks about the way that she found them and what she did to the poor, pitiful creature that they brought to life. Because even though she is horrified by it, she is not hesitant at all about putting it out of its misery.
Well, yeah, I mean... And I think that there might be good reason for that, because that creature, it's pitiful, but it also looks very terrifying. Not in the same way as Gollum, but...
Well, maybe let me stop you right there. Maybe not in the way that Gollum is portrayed in the films, but certainly I think in the way that Gollum was meant to be portrayed in the books, because he is a scary character in the books, or at least he's meant to be.
I mean, he eats people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is sort of a common occurrence within the mythology of Tolkien, that all evil things want to eat good people.
That sounds like a metaphorical thing now that I think about it.
Any other observations you have about this episode?
I think that the grandma, I forgot the reason why she hates alchemy so much. I don't think we ever learn it, but I feel like there has to be some reason why she feels so strongly about the military just walking into her home.
Well, I mean, that's her property.
I mean, I know that, but it seems like she becomes even more against the fact that they walked into her home when they start mentioning alchemy. I feel like there's some history there.
I just sort of accepted that as her being old and thus being slightly old-fashioned and slightly opposed to this.
No, alchemy actually is something that isn't all that new to that place.
But it's less conservative. It strays from the norm. It's kind of an unusual, obscure thing. slightly foreign.
It also is definitely very weaponized as far as Semestris goes, at the very least. And I like how they bring up Shingi's alchemy in this episode, mostly because you'll learn about it later on, so that should be cool.
After the transmutation scene, we watch Edward slowly recovering, and by slowly, I mean shockingly not slowly.
Yeah, but, like, I really loved that scene where, like, Roy Mustang meets Edward, and for the entire conversation, all you see is Edward just looking dead. You know that he's alive, but he looks like...
He looks defeated. Like
he looks defeated, like he might as well be dead.
He got caught doing something that he probably shouldn't have been doing, and now his tail is between his legs, and there's nothing he can do about it.
And I'm like, you poor thing. Like, you almost feel like he might as well have been dead at that point, you know?
And we talk about scenes that almost made us cry. That moment when Roy is first confronting Edward, and he's like, how could you do this? Why did you do this? And then Alphonse puts his hand on Roy's shoulder and begs for forgiveness.
Oh my gosh, I almost cried then too, because Alphonse, he looked like he was ready to as well, but he's a suit of armor, he can't cry, but he looked so ready to just let the waterworks forth. If only he had tear ducts, they would come out. Those tears would flow.
This moment serves a couple functions. First off, it softens Roy to these characters immediately because, how can you be mad at these two people who are clearly just broken and distraught about what they've done?
Especially Alphonse. Alphonse is like...
He takes responsibility for this. He doesn't think that this is Edward's thing. Like, he says, no, this is my thing. I did this as well. I am just as responsible for the catastrophe that just happened.
Which shows that Alphonse is a really mature person.
You immediately like this character more, simply because he's willing to do that.
I think Alphonse might be like the better person than Edward on most occasions, and I think that's a good thing because it's like
Alphonse humanizes Edward. I think it's important that they have each other, but it's also significant that Alphonse never dissociates from the madness that is his brother.
Yeah. Like, it's good that they recognize that they kind of, like, want to stick together and all that because, brothers.
It is a very sweet moment, even though it is very, very sad, but you respect these characters.
It's bittersweet, yeah. You definitely respect the characters. You respect Alphonse, and you respect Edward just a little less than Alphonse. I mean, you still respect him. Like, you still think he's a pretty good person. But let's face it, Alphonse is the better person.
Alphonse is the better person, but at no point during this episode was I thinking to myself that Edward is a terrible person, just thinking that he is fundamentally flawed. And that is a admirable achievement on the part of the writers. I have a couple more thoughts that I wanted to share, both of which actually tie into the episode previously. I've noticed that there's a mixture of styles going on here.
Yeah?
Which is a bit unusual. There's a combination of the more intricate anime with the kind of rough, I don't know, cartoonish, maybe that's the right word, moments, like when Winry throws the wrench at Edward.
Yeah, that. Like, it's like the details got washed away and it's more like...
It looks slightly more childish.
Yeah.
And goofy.
I think that's a good thing to have during the comedy scenes. I think that's okay.
I find it distracting, honestly.
I think it makes the scenes a little bit more funny.
I have seen it done elsewhere. This is not the first time that I've seen the use of cartoonish, goofy, hand-drawn style over the top of the anime in order to create humor, but I feel like it's been done much better elsewhere. The example that immediately comes to my mind is Teen Titans.
Oh, yeah, they did that very good.
I honestly...
Teen Titans Go sucks, no doubt about it. But Teen Titans, the original cartoon series, I loved that.
I felt like
show.
The original cartoon series very seamlessly managed to blend this rougher style with the more intricate style, and I'm not quite sure why, honestly. And also Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Maybe it's because the Teen Titans show was meant to be kind of a blend, kind of a mixture of certain Western animation stuff and more like Japanese animation.
That is
which
true.
I think is kind of why it did it so seamlessly, is because they probably did their homework on that.
The second and I think final thing that I want to talk about is later on when Edward is advancing as an alchemist, he puts on a demonstration for Führer Bradley, who everyone is very intimidated by. And in a moment of exquisite cockiness,
and of course, hubris,
Edward says, "Oh, you shouldn't be so trusting, because someone could easily have attacked you like I could have just right now." And Führer Bradley is like, "Oh, you adorable little child.
You adorable and naive little soul."
And we again see that Führer Bradley is apparently capable of either destroying things telekinetically or just moving really, really quickly. It is hinted that probably that he moves really quickly.
Yeah, that's
because
it.
you see his sword out, and there's that little shing.
Yeah,
that is completely unrealistic, but
he just moves really fast. You'll learn why later on, but yeah, he moves really fast.
Caffeine.
Exactly. No. What else?
I really liked this episode.
I did too. It's like
I feel slightly exhausted though.
Yeah, me too. I was like, I'm not ready to watch another episode after this. I'm glad we're stopping here. Okay.
One thing that I think we should mention while we are recording is that we started recording for this episode immediately after recording episode 1. So we have no idea how anyone is going to react to this show, because only one of my friends even knows that this is going to happen. I have made no publicity about this, whatever. It's still kind of our little secret.
I wish we could have made a little bit more publicity about it, but oh well.
It is entirely possible that by the time we record for episode 3, other people will know about this show and we might have some feedback, or we might not. We will see in the future. All right, well, we'll listen to y'all later, guys, but you got to go, so...
Listen to all of you later.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.